When I got sober, I was so fucking scared. I did not feel strong in the slightest. I felt weak. I felt vulnerable. I felt scared. I felt, I literally felt like I wanted to just curl up in the fetal position. And I think this was a lot of where my suicidal thoughts came from. I felt like I wasn't enough. I felt like I didn't have enough value. I felt like more of a negative influence, you know, a net negative, if that makes sense, in the world. So that, people say like, oh, the world would be a better place without me. And I truly did feel like that because I felt like I was a drain on my family. I felt like I fucked up, a lot. Like I couldn't do anything right. Um, I felt like I didn't measure up. I didn't feel like I was smart enough. I didn't feel like I was capable of being an adult, capable of having a career. Um, I mean, honestly, guys, I felt like I was in a hole looking up at the rest of the world that was walking on surface level, if that makes sense. I mean, the sense of inferiority was really, really drastic. Um, I was absolutely terrified of trying to live life as it was, sober, being without that comfort of substances, without that anesthesia. Um, I was, I mean, and you talk about compulsion. I mean, Jesus, it wasn't a choice anymore for me, and I know now that this is how it is, I know enough about addiction now to understand that I wasn't alone in feeling like that, but god damn, reflecting on it, it's like it's such a nauseous feeling. It's such a just like lonely feeling, just wanting to curl up in a ball and just disappear, that kind of thing. Um, just that shame can be so fucking overwhelming. And I know now that this is a common thing. I've worked with enough people in addiction and recovery to know now that it's a common thing, that people struggle with, and I know now that um, I wasn't alone, and that's comforting, But this is this is me talking after 17 years of being in recovery and working with thousands of people in addiction and recovery themselves to understand that it's not just me. So I think back to when I didn't know that shit. I didn't know it wasn't just me, where I had never really talked to other people who had gotten clean and sober and dealt with the same kinds of feelings. I just thought I was fucking crazy. I thought there was no hope for me. I am going to live my life fucked up and then I will die. Right? Like, I can remember actually when I finally did start going to the 12-step program and understanding that it was a disease, for a while, that actually just gave me more kind of motivation to keep drinking and using, because I was like, well, it's just a disease, so I'm going to drink and use until I die. And I would always tell people that, fortunately, drinking yourself to death is a slow and painful way to die. And that was legitimately what happened with me. Is I had accepted my fate, so to speak, and decided that I was going to drink myself to death, but it was a very slow, painful process, and kind of forced me into getting help. But just reflecting on those feelings, I mean, it's just, I think about how now looking back, how like that was really what was spearheading my addiction. You know, I did not want to face those feelings. I did not want to deal with those feelings of like, hey Matt, you're not man enough, you're not good enough, you're not smart enough, you're not savvy enough, like you're a fucking idiot, you're a piece of shit, you're gonna fuck everything up, you're a failure. You know, those were the thoughts running through my head. And honestly, sometimes those thoughts creep back in. And luckily now I feel like I have enough support and reference to understand that feelings aren't facts. But damn, in that moment when I was struggling to get sober throughout my addiction, I mean, that shit felt 100% real. 100% real. So I feel very fortunate that I had a lot of help. You know, I had people telling me, I remember telling my sponsor things that I've never told another human being. You know, I was honest with him about how I felt like I was, it sounds so cliche to say I didn't have value or I didn't have worth, but the reality was like, I felt completely inferior. It's a dark feeling. It is a dark, dark feeling. And, looking back, it makes sense why I wanted to continue drinking, to continue numbing those really dark, depressing thoughts I had about myself. What I've learned now is that part of those feelings are because of the substance use. One of the things that is really important in addiction that a lot of times people don't talk about is this concept of state-dependent learning. So what happened with me is I was fucked up on a regular basis from the time I was 15 years old. So things that I was learning, it was while I was fucked up. So then, if you fast forward to when I got sober, I didn't know how to really talk to people without being fucked up. I mean, I was so dependent on the alcohol and other things to socialize, probably the biggest thing is socializing, just to be around other people. And so, I didn't know how to function in society. I didn't know how to be an adult, and I've said this in previous videos, but man, that fear is just so paralyzing, just kept me doing the same thing over and over. Okay, give me anesthesia for the fear. I don't want to feel these feelings of inferiority. I don't want to feel that fear of facing the world and facing myself. I don't want to deal with that. Give me more anesthesia, right? And then in moments of trying to get sober, okay, I can do this, right? You know what? I'm strong. I can fucking do this. Then as soon as something triggers that fear, that insecurity, I'm just, I can't deal with it. I can't fucking deal with it. I was wrong. I fucked up. I was wrong. I can't deal with it sober, right? That facing myself, understanding who I was, you know, I was terrified, absolutely terrified. So I want to put this out there to just hopefully somebody's watching this, that may be feeling the same way and thinking those same thoughts of just feeling completely hopeless, feeling completely alone, feeling like people don't understand or they won't understand. I'm fucking crazy. I'm a loser. I'm a piece of shit. All these kinds of things, because that shame is so pervasive. The way that I would talk about it when I was working in treatment is, I would tell myself 100 times a day I was a piece of shit. And so what does a piece of shit do? Well, a piece of shit does shitty things. So that shame, shame locked me into that belief that I was a bad person, that I was unworthy, that not just that I was unworthy, guys, or that I was a bad person, that I literally was a fucking loser. Like that people, if they saw the real me, if they knew the real me, they would fucking point and laugh. Look at this fucking idiot. Look at this fucking loser. Those kinds of things, right? I was terrified of people seeing the real me. And that alcohol, the pills, the weed, that stuff gave me the courage to be around other people, because essentially I was putting on a mask, right? I wasn't the real me, so I didn't have to worry about people seeing the real me. So dealing with myself in sobriety was a slow process. Getting through each day when I was terrified of who I was, confronting my past, and just living in the moment, and kind of, they talk about living life on life's terms, accepting myself for who I am, accepting my faults, accepting my insecurities, confronting and dealing with those instead of just trying to push them down, and again just numbing that pain, those feelings. It was a difficult process that I would have not gotten through without a lot of help, a lot of support, counseling, a sponsor, other people that were in recovery that understood the same feelings. I've come to realize I was definitely not alone. I've come to realize that, especially for men, I think I've worked with a lot of men in recovery, this feeling of inferiority, this feeling of not being man enough, these kinds of things are not uncommon. It's just nobody fucking talks about them. Nobody fucking talks about them because people are terrified of being seen, being judged for feeling inferior, that kind of thing. It's a crazy, it's one of those crazy kind of social phenomenons, I think, that everybody deals with fears and insecurities, but nobody wants to show them. No one wants to admit that they're real, and I think with the addiction, it takes this to a whole different level. And one of the things I learned working in this field is that the process of becoming dependent on substances makes that feeling so much worse. So for me, I feel like I had maybe a root of that feeling of inferiority. Like I can remember feeling like I didn't measure up to my dad and my sister. my dad was more athletic than I was. He was more of a ladies' man, these kinds of things. And I felt like, oh, I'm not manly enough. I'm not as much of a man as my dad is. My sister was smarter than me, so I felt like I wasn't smart enough. I wasn't capable enough. All these things, right? I think there was some level of like, those seeds of insecurities and fears and doubts and things. But what I've learned is that the substances make those worse, because you become dependent on the substances for courage, for socializing, for feeling okay, right? And then it's like it takes on a life of its own, because there's a thing called state dependent learning. So I can learn skills and information while I'm in this like window of impairment, right? But I can only access those skills and that information, or I'm best able to access those skills and information in that window of impairment. So what happens is you really lose that freedom to access that information and those skills unless you're fucked up again. So again, it takes on this life of its own, and it makes you start feeling like you're at your best when you're fucked up, or you're smarter, or you're more capable, all these things, right? And it can apply to like all sorts of different things. But to me, one of the most dangerous things, at least for myself, was the social skills. Learning social skills, kind of becoming an adult while I was fucked up, right? Like, dating, dealing, with the opposite sex. For me, talking to women, I felt so much more comfortable doing it when I was fucked up. I mean, I was terrified to do it when I was sober, social anxiety, it creates social anxiety. So really, that's what I mean when I say it takes on a life of its own, is it creates that dependence. If I feel like I'm at my best when I'm drunk, when I'm high, when I popped a pill, it could just be buzz. It doesn't have to be trashed, right? But if I feel like I need that pregame, so to speak, then it kind of takes on a life of its own, and that's what's going to create that dependence. Well, unfortunately, my feelings about myself, who Matt is without the drugs or alcohol, are going to get lower and lower and lower. So, when I got sober again, I was terrified. My self-esteem was terrible. I thought I was a piece of shit. I thought I was a failure. I thought I really was not of value, and fighting those things was the main thing in staying sober, if that makes sense. Like those daily cravings, and in the beginning it was, multiple times a day. A lot of times that what was going on is I was combating those feelings of not feeling good enough, all these different things, right? And so I craved my medicine. I craved that numbing effect. But this is why recovery is a process, okay? Because the brain is slowly healing. You're starting to deal with these thoughts, these feelings, these fears, these insecurities. You're starting to deal with them with a clear mind, or a clearer mind, and the brain needs that time to heal and adjust. And what I see over the years of working with people in recovery is people don't give the brain that time. They get frustrated, you know. And again, I look back at my own, like if I didn't have my sponsor to talk to, or other friends that were in recovery, or if I wasn't in counseling, you know, I wouldn't have made it, because the way that I was feeling, you know, kind of what my brain was doing to me was unbearable. So, you know, left to my own devices, if it's just me, myself, and I, well, I need to get fucked up because I cannot handle the shit that's going on in my brain, right? But if I talk to somebody else who gets it, you know, then that can bring me back to a place of understanding. You know, it's like the brain kind of like spirals, you know, it's like this whirlwind, right? And I need somebody to like calm the storm, right? Get me back to a place where, hey, everything's gonna be okay. You don't have to get fucked up, because that's not gonna make anything better, right? You can deal with this. Just let's deal with today, and then tomorrow we'll deal with tomorrow. So guys, I hope this was helpful. You know, understanding that feelings and thoughts that you're having, you're not alone, that it's a normal part of what happens to the brain because of the substance use, the way that the brain gets distorted and physically changes as a result of the substance use. You know, just understand that and give yourself time, give yourself patience. Don't give up, you know. And if you fuck up, just start again, you know, just try again tomorrow. For most people, it's a work in progress. It's trial and error, you know. So guys, I hope this is helpful. And down below, tell me what do you struggle with? What are you struggling with right now? What have you overcome? What's helpful for you? You know, share some thoughts with me about your own process of recovery. I'd love to hear it. So guys, I appreciate it. Hopefully this was helpful, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Thanks.